Welcome to Screaming Reverberations, a podcast traversing the histories and contexts of the work of Thomas Pynchon. I'm Geena.
And I'm Frank.
Intro end.
I was kind of hoping you would immediately go into how are you guys doing tonight?
No, we don't do how are you doing tonight, because we don't know what night is day, whatever.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's always how are you doing.
This is part 3 of our Beach Boys, Manson, and the Mafia series.
Yeah, this is kind of like a little sub-episode of that, I guess.
So this would be, I guess, part 3B. So part A was on the early life of Evelle Younger.
And with this episode, what we're going to be doing is... I maybe think of this less as like an episode and more as like a reading, because we're going to be reading Thomas Pynchon's 1966 article from the New York Times. When was this published? Let me give you an exact date, dear listener. This was published June 12th, 1966. This is an article entitled A Journey into the Mind of Watts. I honestly think that this is not only very enlightening for where we are about to go with Evelle Younger's life, this is also highly enlightening for Inherent Vice in general, because I think it could be argued that, some of the seeds of Pynchon's depiction of LA ultimately kind of lie in this article, and we have got some passages that we're going to compare with parts of this article towards the end of this episode. That's the idea, though, is that we're going to go ahead and read this article, A Journey into the Mind of Watts. It's pretty good. I wouldn't call it fantastic. I don't know that there is an audio reading of. Consider this a contribution to the Pynchon audio canon.
Yeah, let's try to do our best.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to trade off every 2 paragraphs.
Right, which these are fairly short paragraphs.
So if you're following along, or if you're not following along, that's how the paragraphs are broken into.
And again, this is from June of 66, which this is a little under a year after the Watts uprising. The Watts, that happened in mid-August of 65 for about 5 days in late 1965. When do we want to get into it? Who wants to start?
Okay, you start the first 2.
So this is A Journey into the Mind of Watts by Thomas Pynchon. The night of May 7, after a chase that began in Watts and ended some 50 blocks farther north, 2 Los Angeles policemen, Caucasians, succeeded in halting a car driven by Leonard Deadweiler, a Negro. With him were his pregnant wife and a friend. The younger cop, who'd once had a complaint brought against him for rousting some Negro kids around in a more than usually abusive way, went over and stuck his head and gun in the car window to talk to Deadweiler. A moment later, there was a shot. The young Negro fell sideways in the seat and died. The last thing he said, according to the other cop, was, "She's going to have a baby." The coroner's inquest went on for the better part of 2 weeks. One cop claiming the car had lurched suddenly, causing his service revolver to go off by accident. Deadweiler's widow claiming it was cold-blooded murder and that the car had never moved. The verdict, to no one's surprise, cleared the cop of all criminal responsibility. It had been an accident. The DA announced immediately that he thought so too, and that as far as he was concerned, the case was closed. Just as an aside outside of the text, the DA in this case is Evelle Younger. That's the only aside I'm going to make during the reading of this, but I think it's worth pointing out that even though he doesn't name him by name here, that's Evelle Younger he's talking about there.
Right, in Inherent Vice, Evelle Younger was mentioned by name in the second page, I think.
Right. Evelle Younger is Penny Kimball's boss. Penny is a junior deputy DA in his office, which at the time that Inherent Vice is set, Younger would be about to move into the Attorney General's office in Sacramento.
To continue.
Right, just as a reminder for anybody that doesn't know Evelle Younger.
But as far as Watts is concerned, it's still very much open. Preachers in the community are urging calm, or, as others are putting it, make any big trouble, baby. The man just going to come back in and shoot you like last time. Snipers are sniping, but so far not hitting much of anything. Occasional fire bombs are being lobbed at cars with white faces inside, or into empty sports models that look as if they might be white property. There have been a few fires of mysterious origin. A Negro Teen Post, part of the LA Poverty Wars Keep Them Out of the Streets effort, has had all its windows busted. The young lady in charge expressing the wish next morning that she could talk with the malefactors, involve them, see if they couldn't work out the problem together. In the back of everybody's head, of course, is the same question. Will there be a repeat of last August's riot? An even more interesting question is, why is everybody worrying about another riot? Haven't things in Watts improved any since the last one? A lot of white folks are wondering. Unhappily, the answer is no. The neighborhood may be seething with social workers, data collectors, VISTA volunteers, and other assorted members of the humanitarian establishment, all of whose intentions are the purest in the world. But somehow, nothing much has changed. There are still the poor, the defeated, the criminal, the desperate, all hanging in there with what must seem a terrible vitality.
The killing of Leonard Deadweiler has once again brought it all into sharp focus, brought back long-standing pain, reminded everybody of how very often the cop does approach you with his revolver ready, so that nothing he does with it can then really be accidental, of how, especially at night, everything can suddenly reduce to a matter of reflexes, your life trembling in the crook of a cop's finger, because it is dark, and Watts, and the history of this place and these times, makes it impossible for the cop to come on any different, or for you to hate him any less. Both of you are caught in something neither of you wants, and yet night after night, with casualties or without, these traditional scenes continue to be played out all over the south-central part of this city. Whatever else may be wrong in a political way, like the inadequacy of Great Depression techniques applied to a scene that has long outgrown them, like an old-fashioned grafter's glee among the city fathers over the vast amounts of poverty war bread Uncle is now making available to them. Lying much closer to the heart of LA's racial sickness is the coexistence of two very different cultures, one white and one black.
While the white culture is concerned with various forms of systematized folly, the economy of the area, in fact, depending on it, the black culture is stuck pretty much with basic realities like disease, like failure, violence, and death, which the whites have mostly chosen and can afford to ignore. The two cultures do not understand each other. The white values are displayed without let-up on black people's TV screens, and though the panoramic sense of black impoverishment is hard to miss from atop the Harbor Freeway, which so many whites must drive at least twice every working day, somehow it occurs to very few of them to leave at the Imperial Highway exit for a change, go east instead of west only a few blocks, and take a look at Watts. A quick look, the simplest kind of beginning. But Watts is country which lies, psychologically, uncounted miles further than most whites seem at present willing to travel. On the surface anyway, the Deadweiler affair hasn't made it look any different, though underneath the mood in Watts is about what you might expect. Feelings range from a reflexive, angry, driving need to hit back somehow, to an anxious worry that the slaying is just one more bad grievance, one more bill that will fall due some warm evening this summer. Yet, in the daytime's brilliance and heat, it is hard to believe there is any mystery to Watts. Everything seems so out in the open. All of it is real. No plastic faces, not transistors, no hidden muzak, or Disneyfied landscaping, or smiling little chicks to show you around. Not in race riot land. Only a few historic landmarks, like the police substation, one command post for the white forces last August, pigeons now thick and cooing up on its red-tiled roof. Or, on down the street, vacant lots, still looking charred around the edges, winking with empty Tokay, port and sherry pints, some of the bottles peeking out of paper bags, others busted.
A kid could come along in his bare feet and step on this glass, not that you'd ever know. These kids are so tough you can pull slivers of it out of them and never get a whimper. It's part of their landscape, both the real and the emotional one. Busted glass, busted crockery, nails, tin cans, all kinds of scrap and waste. Traditionally Watts. An Italian immigrant named Simon Roja spent 30 years gathering some of it and converting a little piece of the neighborhood along 107th Street into the famous Watts Tower. perhaps his own dream of how things should have been. A fantasy of fountains, boats, tall open-work spires, encrusted with a dazzling mosaic of Watts debris. Next to the towers, along the old Pacific electric tracks, kids are busy every day busting more bottles on the steel rails. But Simon Roja is dead, and now the junk just accumulates. A few blocks away, other kids are out playing on the hot blacktop of the school playground. Brothers and sisters too young yet for school have it better. Wherever they are, they have yards, trees, hoses, hiding places. Not the crowded, shadeless tenement living of any Harlem. Just the same 1 or 2 story urban sprawl as all over the rest of LA, giving you some piece of grass at least to expand into when you don't especially feel like being inside.
In the business part of town, there is a different ideal of refuge. Pool halls and bars, warm and dark inside, are crowded. Many domino, dice, and whist games in progress. Outside, men stand around a beer cooler listening to a ball game on the radio. Others lean or hunker against the sides of buildings, low, faded stucco boxes that remind you oddly of certain streets in Mexico. Women go by, to and from what shopping there is. It is easy to see how crowds, after all, can form quickly in those streets, around the least seed of a disturbance or accident. For the moment, it all only awaits in the sun. Overhead, big jets now and then come vacuum cleanering into land. The wind is westerly, and Watts lies under the approaches to LA International. The jets hang what seems only a couple of 100 feet up in the air. Through the smog, they show up more white than silver, highlighted by the sun, hardly solid, only the ghost or possibilities of airplanes.
From here, much of the white culture that surrounds Watts, and in a curious way besieges it, looks like those jets. A little unreal, a little less than substantial. For Los Angeles, more than any other city, belongs to the mass media. What is known around the nation as the LA scene exists chiefly as images on a screen or TV tube, as four-color magazine photos, as old radio jokes, as new songs that survive only a matter of weeks. It is basically a white scene, and illusion is everywhere in it. From the giant aerospace firms that flourish or retrench at the whims of Robert McNamara, to the quote-unquote action everybody mills along the strip on weekends looking for, unaware that their search will usually end, unfulfilled, and is the only actual action in town. Watts lies impacted in the heart of this white fantasy. It is, by contrast, a pocket of bitter reality. The only illusion Watts ever allowed itself was to believe for a long time in the white version of what a Negro was supposed to be. But with the Muslim and civil rights movements, that went too.
Since the August rioting, there has been little building here, little buying. Lots whose buildings were burned off them are still waiting vacant and littered with garbage, occupied only by a parked car or two, or kids fooling around after school, or winos sharing a pint in the early morning. The other day, on one of them, there were groundbreaking festivities, attended by a county supervisor, pretty high school girls, decked in ribbons, a white store owner and his wife, who, in the true Watts spirit, busted a bottle of champagne over a rock, all because the man had decided to stay and rebuild his $200,000 market, the first such major rebuilding since the riot. Watts people themselves talk about another kind of aura, vaguely evil, complain that Negroes living in better neighborhoods like to come in under the freeway as to a red light district, looking for some girl, some game, maybe some connection. Narcotics is said to be a rare bust in Watts these days, although the narco people cruise the area earnestly, on the lookout for dope fiends, dope rings, dope peddlers. But the poverty of Watts makes it more likely that if you have pot or a little something else to spare, you will want to turn a friend on, not sell it. Tomorrow, or when he can, your friend will return the favor.
At the Deadweiler inquest, much was made of the dead man's high blood alcohol content, as if his being drunk made it somehow all right for the police to shoot him. But alcohol is a natural part of the Watts style, as natural as LSD is around Hollywood. The white kid digs hallucination simply because he is conditioned to believe so much in escape. Escape is an integral part of life, because the white LA scene makes accessible to him so many different forms of it. But a Watts kid, brought up in a pocket of reality, looks perhaps not so much for escape as just for some calm, some relaxation. And beer and wine is good enough for that, especially good at the end of a bad day. Like after you have driven, say, down to Torrance or Long Beach or wherever it is they're hiring, because they don't seem to be in Watts. Not even in the miles of heavy industry that sprawl along Alameda Street, that gray and murderous arterial which lies at the eastern boundary of Watts looking like the edge of the world.
So, you groove instead down the freeway, maybe wondering when some cop is going to stop you, because the old piece of a car you're driving, which you bought for $20 or $30 you picked up somehow, makes a lot of noise or burns some oil. Catching you mobile widens the man's horizons, gives him more things he can get you on, like excessive smoking is a great favorite with him. If you do get to where you were going without encountering a cop, you may spend your day looking at the white faces of personnel men, their uniform glance of suspicion, their automatic smiles, and listening to polite put-downs. I decided once to ask, a kid says. One time, they told me I didn't meet their requirements. So I said, well, what are you looking for? I mean, how can I train? What things do I have to learn so I can meet your requirements? Know what he said? We are not obligated to tell you what our requirements are.
He isn't. That right there is the hell and headache. He doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to because he is the man. Or he was. A lot of kids these days are more apt to be calling him the little man, meaning not so much any member of the power structure as just your average white LA taxpayer, registered voter, property owner, employed, stable, mortgaged, and the rest. The little man bugs these kids more than the man ever bugged their parents. It is the little man who is standing on their feet and in their way. He's all over the place, and there is not much they can do to change him or the way he feels about them. A Watts kid knows more of what goes on inside white heads than possibly whites do themselves. He knows how often the little man has looked at him and thought, bad credit risk, or poor learner, or sexual threat, or welfare chiseler, without knowing a thing about him personally.
The natural, normal thing to want to do is hit the little man. But what, after all, has he done? Mild, respectable, possibly smiling, he has called you no names, shown no weapons, only told you perhaps that the job was filled, the house rented. With the cop it may get more dangerous, but at least it's honest. You understand each other. Both of you silently admitting that all the cop really has going for him is his gun. There was a time, they'll tell you, you'd say, take off the badge, baby, and let's settle it. I mean, he wouldn't, but you'd say it. But since August, man, the way I feel, hell with the badge. Just take off that gun.
The cop does not take off the gun. The hassle stays verbal. But this means that, besides protecting and serving the little man, the cop also functions as his effigy. If he does not get emotional and say something like boy, or there's a hard R N-word, you then have the option of cooling it, or else, again, this is more frequent since last August, calling him the name he expects to be called, though it is understood you are not commenting in any literal way on what goes on between him and his mother. It is a ritual exchange like the Dirty Dozens. Usually, as in the Deadweiler incident, it is the younger cop of the pair who's more troublesome. Most Watts kids are hip to what's going on in this rookie's head, the things he feels he has to prove, as much as to the elements of the ritual. Before the cop can say, let's see your ID, you learn to take it out politely and say, you want to see my ID? Naturally, it will bug the cop more the further ahead of him you can stay. It is flirting with disaster, but it's the cop who has the gun, so you do what you can.
You must anticipate always how the talk is going to go. It's something you pick up quite young, same as you learn the different species of cop, the black and white, named for the color scheme of their automobiles, who are LA, city police, and in general, the least flexible. The LA County Sheriff's Department, who style themselves more of an elite, try to maintain a certain distance from the public and are less apt to harass you unless you seem worthy. The Compton City cops, who travel only one to a car and come on very tough, like leaning 4 of you at a time against a wall and shaking you all down. The Juvies, who ride in unmarked Plymouths and are cruising all over the place soon as the sun goes down, pulling up alongside you with pleasantries like, which one's buying the wine tonight? Or, who are you guys planning to rob this time? They are kidding, of course, trying to be pals, but Watts kids, like most, do not like being put in with winos, are dangerous drivers or thieves, or in any bag considered criminal or evil. Whatever the cop's motives, It looks like mean and deliberate ignorance. In the daytime, and especially with any kind of crowd, the cop's surface style has changed some since last August. Time was, you'll hear, man used to go right in, very mean, pick maybe one kid out of the crowd he figured was the troublemaker, try to bust him down in front of everybody. But now the people start yelling back, how they don't want no more of that. All of a sudden, the man gets very meek.
Still, however much a cop may seem to be following the order of the day read to him every morning about being courteous to everybody, his behavior with a crowd will really depend, as it always has, on how many of his own he can muster and how fast. For his mayor, Sam Yorty, is a great believer in the virtues of overwhelming force as a solution to racial difficulties. This approach has not gained much favor in Watts. In fact, the mayor of Los Angeles appears to many Negroes to be the very incarnation of the little man, looking out for no one but himself, speaking always out of expediency, and never, never to be trusted. The Economic and Youth Opportunities Agency, EYOA, is a joint city-county, quote-unquote, umbrella agency. The state used to be represented, but has dropped out, for many projects scattered around the poorer parts of LA, and seems to be Sam Yorty's native element, if not indeed the flower of his consciousness. Bizarre, confused, ever in flux, strangely ineffective, EYOA hardly sees a day go by without somebody resigning or being fired or making an accusation or answering one. All of it confirming the Watts Negro's already sad estimation of the little man. The Negro attitude towards EYOA is one of clear mistrust, though degrees of suspicion vary, from the housewife wanting only to be left in peace and quiet, who hoped that maybe the man is lying less than usual this time, to the young, active disciple of Malcolm X who dismisses it all with a contemptuous shrug.
But why? Asked one white lady volunteer. There are so many agencies now that you can go to that can help you if you'll only follow your complaint. They don't help you. This particular kid had been put down trying to get a job with one of the larger defense contractors. Maybe not before, but it's different now. Now, the kid sighed. Now. See, people have been hearing that now for a long time. And I'm just tired of the man telling you, now it's okay. Now we mean what we say. In Watts, apparently, where no one can afford the luxury of illusion, there is little reason to believe that now will be any different, any better than last time. It is perhaps a measure of the people's indifference that only 2% of the poor in Los Angeles turned out to elect representatives to the EYOA Poverty Board. For a hopeless minority on the board, 7 out of 23, nobody saw much point in voting.
Meantime, the outposts of the establishment drowse in the bright summery smog. Secretaries chat the afternoons plaintively away about machines that will not accept the cards they had punched for them. White volunteers sit filing, doodling, talking on the phones, doing any kind of busy work, wondering where the quote-unquote clients are. Inspirational mottos like "Smile" decorate the Beaverboard office walls, along with flowcharts to illustrate the proper disposition of quote-unquote cases, and with clippings from the slick magazines about what is emotional maturity. Items like smiling and emotional maturity are in fact very big with the well-adjusted middle-class professionals, Negro and white, who man the mimeographs and computers of the poverty war here. Gladly, they seem to be smiling themselves out of any meaningful communication with the poor. Besides a 19th century faith that tried and true approaches, sound counseling, good intentions, perhaps even compassion, will set Watts straight, they are also burdened with the personal attitudes they bring to work with them. Their reflexes, especially about conformity, about failure, about violence, are predictable.
We had a hell of a time with this one girl, a youth training and employment project counselor recalls. You should have seen those hairdos of hers, piled all the way up to here, and the screwy outfit she'd come in with. You just wouldn't believe. We had to take her aside and explain to her that employers just don't go for that sort of thing, that she'd be up against a lot of very smooth-looking chicks, heels and stockings, conservative hair and clothes. We finally got her to come around. The same goes for boys who like to wear Malcolm hats or afro haircuts. The idea the counselors push evidently is to look as much as possible like a white applicant, which is to say, like a Negro job counselor or social worker. This has not been received with much enthusiasm among the kids it is designed to help out, and is one reason business is slow around the various projects.
There is a similar difficulty among the warriors about failure. They are in a socio-economic bag, along with the majority of white Angelenos, who seem more terrified of failure than of death. It is difficult to see where any of them have experienced significant defeat or loss. If they have, it seems to have been long rationalized away as something else. You are likely to hear from them wisdom on the order of, life has a way of surprising us, simply as a function of time, even if all you do is stand on the street corner and wait. Watts is full of street corners where people wait and stand, as they have been, some of them, for 20 or 30 years, without surprise one ever having come along. Yet the poverty warriors must believe in this form of semi-miracle, because their world and their scene cannot accept the possibility that there may be, after all, no surprise. But it is something that Watts has always known.
As for violence, in a pocket of reality such as Watts, violence is never far from you, because you are a man, because you have been put down, because for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, somehow, sometime. Yet to these innocent, optimistic child bureaucrats, violence is an evil and an illness, possibly because it threatens property and status they cannot help cherishing. They remember last August riot as an outburst, a seizure. Yet what, from the realistic viewpoint of Watts, was so abnormal? "Man's got his foot on your neck," said one guy who was there. "Sooner or later, you're going to stop asking him to take it off." The violence it took to get that foot to ease up even the little it did was no surprise. Many had predicted it. Once it got going, its basic objective, to beat the black and white police, seemed a reasonable one, and was gained the minute the man had to send troops in. Everybody seems to have known about it. There is hardly a person in Watts now who finds it painful to talk about, or who regrets that it happened, unless he lost somebody.
But in the white culture outside, in that creepy world full of pre-cardiac Mustang drivers who scream insults at one another only when the windows are up, of large corporations where nice guymanship is the standing order, regardless of whose executive back one may be endeavoring to stab, of an enormous priest caste of shrinks who counsel moderation and compromise as the answer to all forms of hassle. Among so much well-behaved unreality, it is next to impossible to understand how Watts may truly feel about violence. In terms of strict reality, violence may be a means to getting money, for example, no more dishonest than collecting exorbitant carrying charges from a customer on relief, as white merchants here still do. Far from a sickness, violence may be an attempt to communicate, or to be who you really are. "Sure, I did 2 stretches," a kid said. "Both times for fighting, but I didn't deserve either one. First time, the cat was bigger than I was. Next time, it was 2 against 1, and I was the one. But he was busted all the same. Perhaps because Whitey, who knows how to get everything he wants, no longer has fisticuffs available as a technique, and sees no reason why everybody shouldn't go the nice guy route. If you are thinking maybe there is a virility hang-up in here too, that putting a Negro into a correctional institution for fighting is also some kind of neutering operation, well, you might have something there, who knows?
It is, after all, in white LA's interest to cool Watts any way it can, to put the area under a siege of persuasion, to coax the Negro poor into taking on certain white values. Give them a little property, and they will be less tolerant of arson. Get them to go in hock for a car or color TV, and they'll be more likely to hold down a steady job. Some see it for what it is, this come on, this false welcome, this attempt to transmogrify the reality of Watts into the unreality of Los Angeles. Some don't. Watts is tough, has been able to resist the unreal. If there is any drift away from reality, it is by way of myth-making. As this summer warms them up, last August riot is being remembered less as chaos and more as art. Some talk now of a balletic quality to it, a coordinated and graceful drawing of cops away from the center of the action, a scattering of the man's power, either with real incidents or false alarms.
Others remember it in terms of music. Through much of the the rioting seemed to run, they say, a remarkable empathy, or whatever it is that jazz musicians feel on certain nights. Everybody knowing what to do and when to do it, without needing a word or a signal. You could go up to anybody. The Cats could be in the middle of burning down a store or something, but they'd tell you, explain very calm, just what they were doing, what they were going to do next, and that's what they'd do, man. Nobody had to give orders. Restructuring of the riot goes on in other ways. All Easter week this year, in the spirit of the season, there was a renaissance of the arts, a kind of festival in memory of Simon Roja, held at Markham Junior High in the heart of Watts.
Along with theatrical and symphonic events, the festival also featured a roomful of sculptures fashioned entirely from found objects, found, symbolically enough, in the Simon Roja tradition, among the wreckage the rioting had left, exploiting textures of charred wood, twisted metal, fused glass. Many of the works were fine, honest rebirths. In one corner was this old, busted, hollow TV set with a rabbit ears antenna on top. Inside, where its picture tube should have been, gaping out with scorched wiring, threaded like electronic ivy among its crevices and sockets, was a human skull. The name of the piece was The Late, Late, Late Show.
And that's it.
That's the end of the article. So this is part 2 of the discussion following the Watts.
This is our discussion. And I want to start off just by talking briefly about something that isn't in our notes and is only vaguely Pynchon related. But it's like the mention of the Smile posters. You know, I wonder, it would be really interesting if those were where Brian Wilson got the idea for the album Smile, which I think he did just see that on a poster somewhere. So, you know, that's a very interesting cross-connection that, like, that album's title was likely inspired by this ad campaign derived from LA's kind of dipshit war on poverty following Watts.
Right, and also ties into the white culture of, like, being nice
Right,
at work.
right.
You have to be nice.
You gotta be nice.
Self-improvement.
Well, even, you know,
corporate environment.
I love the Beach Boys as much as anybody else, you know, but it's like, yeah, that is kind of, they were definitely acting as sort of like a panacea to some of the other sentiments being expressed in popular music, you know, because like I said, I love the Beach Boys, but like for a long time, the sentiment expressed in that music is just like, bro, you need to smile and feel good and like, you know, they're singing about Tootsie Rolls and shit. Like, you know, it's like very like saccharine fucking white culture besieging Watts.
And the image of like the white culture and like the TV.
Right. I do find the use of that image of the TV there, that art installation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're mostly gonna be, we're gonna read a few short passages from Inherent Vice and just excuse me, I'm hiccuping.
Frankie got the hiccups?
I do. We're gonna read a few short passages out of Inherent Vice, though, and just kind of compare and contrast with what we read earlier. I think that article's pretty great. I think it's Pynchon at a fairly, like, young moment in his political development. I think that he also says a lot of, like, fairly radical shit for an article published in the New York Times.
When was The Crying in Lot 49 published? 65?
I think it was 66. I might be wrong. Yeah, 1966.
Okay.
April 27th. So, The Crying of Lot 49 had just come out right when this article came out.
Okay, it's nice to put that in perspective.
Right.
All right, so the first excerpt we have from Inherent Vice covers.
We're gonna kind of be talking about, briefly at least, the incident that he starts off the article describing, which is the murder of Leonard Deadwyler by the LAPD. I guess this would be, let's say, 6, 7, 8 months around after the Watts riot. I don't mean to call it a riot, but the fucking terminal I slid.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think that, like, the circumstances of the Deadwyler murder where he's kind of shot with his wife and a friend in the back seat. I think it's like really similar to the scene in Inherent Vice where they're leaving the Golden Fang headquarters, Doc and Dinas, and Japonica gives them a ride with Dr. Rudy in the back, Dr. Blacknoid.
Yeah, Blacknoid. Yeah, and like Doc and Blacknoid are...
Right, like they've got, they're high as hell and they've got this package of like probably drugs or money up under Doc's seat. But
yeah, everyone is really paranoid.
Right. But I think it's worth noting that basically the exact same thing that happened to Leonard Deadweiler happens to these people, but from where these are white people, they switch the drivers around and they're let go. Like I feel like he's probably calling back to this incident of history that he talked about in this article. So do we want to read this passage real quick?
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, this is from Inherent Vice, Chapter 11. License and registration, miss? The cop seemed to be focused on Japonica's tits. She smiled back at him in high-intensity silence, occasionally glancing at the Smith & Wesson on his hip. His partner, a rookie even blonder than he was, came and leaned on the passenger's side, content for the moment to watch Dinas, who had paused in his effort to climb through the roof to gaze at the strobing array of colored lights on top of the cruiser, and now and then go, "Oh, wow, man. Are you the great beast?" inquired rattling mad Japonica in her sub-jailbait lilt. No, Blacknoid droning desperately. That's a policeman, Japonica, who only wants to make sure you're all right. Just a license and registration, if you wouldn't mind, said the cop. You know you were driving without your headlights, miss. But I can see in the dark, Japonica nodding emphatically. I can see real good. Her sister went into labor about an hour ago, Blacknoid imagining he was charming their way out of a ticket. And Miss Fenway promised she'd be there in time to see the baby born, so she might have been a little inattentive back there. That case, said the cop. Maybe somebody else ought to be driving. Japonica promptly jumped in the back seat with Blacknoid, while Doc slid over behind the wheel and Dinas moved up front to ride shotgun. The cops looked on beaming, like instructors at an etiquette class. Oh, and we'll need everybody's ID too, the rookie announced. Sure thing, Doc bringing out his PI license. What's it about, officer?
Right, so I definitely feel like there are echoes of what he says about the Deadweiler incident and all of this stuff.
Right, the pregnant wife and Blacknoid saying, "Oh,
right,
sister's
we're
pregnant."
We're rushing to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. But this is just like white people making up excuses. It's not.
Right.
It's not a real incident.
Right. And even, Pynchon mentions, the dynamic between, the rookie cop and the older cop, and this is exactly that, this is like a rookie and an older guy.
So there are parallels between this fictionalized incident of white people and the real incident.
Right, well, I think it's he's paralleling it so that he can contrast the reaction.
Okay, we have another excerpt from Inherent Vice. This is from Chapter 2. Okay, so what's this passage about? Let's set it up first.
So this is, both of these scenes have a great depiction in the movie, but this is the scene where Tariq and Doc first meet towards the beginning of the book. This is from Chapter 2. Tariq is sort of explaining the history of Channelview Estates briefly to Doc. I think that there are some wonderful parallels in this passage being drawn between some of the things that Pynchon is talking about in the aftermath of the Watts. He talks briefly about this first store moving back in and nobody seems very excited about it. And ultimately what would happen would be that, large portions of that land were ultimately redeveloped, much in the fashion of Channelview Estates. I don't believe that is what exactly happened to that precise patch of land that he's more or less referencing in Inherent Vice. Because you can track Channelview Estates, the location that he mentions. You can work out, roughly speaking, where that is. You're looking for kind of an intersection of, it's in kind of a dogleg created by the Dominguez flood control channel directly south of Artesia Boulevard, but it would have to be somewhere in there. And this is currently where I believe the very large soccer stadium in LA is. I cannot immediately recall the name of it, but we will talk about that at some point. So anyway, I'll go ahead and read this passage.
Go ahead.
Tariq was looking at Doc with a peculiar intensity, and his eyes had grown yellow and pointed. There's something else, Doc guessed. My old street gang, Artesia Crips. When I got out of Chino, I went looking for some of them and found it ain't just them gone, but the turf itself. Far out. What you mean gone? It's not there. Grinded up into little pieces, seagulls all picking at it. Figure I must be tripping, drive around for a while, come back, everything's still gone. Uh-huh, Doc typed, not hallucinating. Nobody and nothing, ghost town, except for this big sign, coming soon on this site. Houses for Peckerwood prices, shopping mall, some shit. Guess who the builder on it? Wolfman again. That's it. On the wall, Doc had a map of the region. Show me. The area Tariq pointed to looked to be a fairly straight shot from here eastward down Artesia Boulevard, and Doc realized after a minute and a half of I thought that I nearly said I nearly said man spreading.
Doc is canceled.
Doc is canceled.
It's canceled. Okay.
The area Tariq pointed to looked to be a fairly straight shot from here eastward down Artesia Boulevard, and Doc realized after a minute and a half of map reading that it had to be the site of Channelview Estates. He pretended to run an ethnicity scan on Tariq. You're like, what, Japanese? How long you been doing this? Looks closer to Gardena than Compton's, all I'm saying. WW2, said Tariq. Before the war, a lot of South Central was still a Japanese neighborhood. Those people got sent to the camps. We come on in to be the next Japs. And now it's your turn to get moved along. More white man's revenge. Freeway up by the airport wasn't enough. Revenge for... Watts? The riots. Some of us say insurrection. The man, he just waits for his moment. So, again, you can... If you look for, the intersection of the Dominguez Flood Control Channel and Artesia Boulevard, they don't exactly intersect, but they run very close and parallel to each other. And if you look sort of where the Dominguez Flood Control Channel doglegs to the southeast, this is roughly the location of Tariq's old turf and now Channelview Estates in the plot of the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And again, let's see. Let me just look something up again very brief.
We're canceling Doc for manspreading.
We are going to.
He's taking up too much space.
Watts was not originally even a black neighborhood. It had a lot of Mexicans in it originally. They tried to build a subdivision here. Yeah, a lot of Watts did not become predominantly black until the 1940s. And then in the 1940s, obviously, the jobs and defense plants in LA drove a lot of people out west. Even then, I think it's worth noting, when Tariq mentions the freeway up by the airport. Because again, Sorta Leach has that monologue about, LA land use. And I think she briefly talks about LAX in that, because LAX, in the context of where Doc and Gordita Beach sort of are, LAX, from what I understand, also moved a lot of black residents out during its construction. And all of this is very ironic because now one of the more recent terminals they built at LAX is named Tom Bradley International. And Tom Bradley was the first black mayor that I think, if we have not briefly discussed him already, we are about to discuss him in the next Evelle Younger episode. I think we talked about him in relation to the PDID.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so we're going to do another reading. This is from chapter 13. And it's also going to cycle back to Manson.
Right. So let's go ahead and read this, and then
do you want to do a preamble for segue into the...
Right, well, this passage is from chapter 13. This is when Doc and Bigfoot are at the Japanese restaurant.
The Pancake House, right?
Right. And this is when, they're kind of discussing how terrified the LAPD are.
Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, if you want to do this one, and then we can talk about it.
Hope you don't mind if we go take a code 7 someplace. Bigfoot reaching under the table and dragging out a Ralph's shopping bag with what looked like several kilos of paperwork in it, getting up and heading out the door, motioning Doc to follow. They went downstairs and out to a Japanese greasy spoon around the corner where the Swedish pancakes with lingonberries couldn't be beat, and which arrived, in fact, no more than a minute and a half after Bigfoot had put his head in the door. Ethnic as always, Bigfoot. I'd share these with you, but then you'd be addicted, and it would be something else on my conscience. Bigfoot started in scarfing. Those pancakes sure look good. Maybe Doc could spoil Bigfoot's appetite or something. He found himself purring maliciously. Aren't you ever bitter that you missed being up there on Cielo Drive, stomping around that famous crime scene with the rest of the high living heat, wiping out them fingerprints, leaving your own, so forth? Having grabbed a second fork from Doc's setup and eating now with both hands. Minor concerns, Bartello. That's only ego and regret. Everybody's got that. Well, everybody who works for a living. But do you want to know the truth? No? Here it is anyway. The truth is, right now, everybody's really fucking scared. Who? You people? All in burrito hounds up in homicide? Scared of what? Charlie Manson? Odd, yes, here in the capital of eternal youth, endless summer and all, that fear should be running the town again as in days of old, like the Hollywood blacklist you don't remember and the Watts rioting you do. It spreads, like blood in a swimming pool, till it occupies all the volume of the day, and then maybe some playful soul shows up with a bucketful of piranhas, dumps them in the pool, and right away they can taste the blood. They swim around looking for what's bleeding, but they don't find anything. All of them getting more and more crazy, till the craziness reaches a point, which is when they begin to feed on each other. And that's the end of the passage we picked.
So, I think it's very worth noting here, he puts Watts in the lineage of, the Hollywood blacklist and Charles Manson, and these are sort of, intrusions. I don't know, maybe not intrusions. They're, created events. These are, I won't say they're not staged. That's, getting far, far, far too schizophrenic. But,
yeah.
These are, set the fuck up. I think we can say that these events are definitely, precognized and, what's the legal term here? Help me, Geena.
Premeditated?
There you go. That's the exact word
Okay.
I'm looking for. You have to look at each one of these things and ask yourself, que bono? Who the fuck benefits, ultimately? And each one of these events sort of acts as yet another way for the stricture of, American federal power to get even tighter around the civilian neck.
I just want to make an aside that to our listeners, even if you don't believe that there's some type of premeditation or forward planning in this, these events were definitely taken advantage of for purposes.
Right, it's even if it's certainly fortuitous for the powers that be.
Yeah, Kismet.
Right, certainly.
Kismet Casino.
Right. I think that's a good point. And I think, again, another thing to note here is that, with Bigfoot's metaphor with these piranhas, the main image that you're looking at here is indeed the piranhas in the pool, yeah. Somebody is putting the piranhas in the fucking pool, man, and you have to ask yourself who's putting the piranhas in the fucking pool. And not just in the context of the novel. I think you have to ask yourself that in the context, obviously he's wanting you to expand that to asking that question in the context of real history. Who put the fucking piranhas in the pool?
Yeah, even now we can't separate our history from the present.
Right, because all of this is certainly maybe not extremely pertinent, but I think it's certainly pertinent to things that are going on now. You look at the way that events in Minnesota will certainly be used by the administration. And that's not saying that people shouldn't do anything in Minnesota. People should intensify what they're doing. And that's not to disrespect what they're already doing, but it's go harder. Everybody believes in you and everybody is behind you. man. The rest of the country is very proud of Minnesota right now. I will say that. We're going to be doing another reading very soon of an article by Evelle Younger, literally entitled How to Start a Riot. And I think that is going to be even more illuminating on current events.
Right, so stay tuned. It's going to be a riot.
We've got more things of this nature coming, certainly, yeah.
And following this episode, we'll have to record and release the second part of the Evelle Younger episode.
Right, that's coming.
So that's gonna cover like the meat of his life and career.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All the juicy stuff.
Parts of that deal very heavily with the events of Watts. Because Evelle Younger being the DA, of course, he processed all of the arrests that are resulted from that. Yeah, we wanted to take a beat and present something to set the scene for the next episode. Right, because I think this does very, very well, and I think it's also this article isn't talked about as much as I think it should be, and I'd like to kind of draw attention to it, because I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't call it all that significant in his canon, but I think definitely for the sake of probing around in the guts of Inherent Vice, I think that this article is certainly very illuminating. And we also wanted to kind of read it into the record. I think that's about it. Yeah, that's all we got for That's about today. All we got. All right. This one's a short one compared to some of these other parts of the episode. And we will finish episode 1, I swear. We will move on. We will finish it. Our quote unquote episode 1. I don't we're fine. Uh-huh. All right. Well, thank you guys. We want to say thank you for listening and thank you for supporting us. Right. Thank you guys so much. Be sure, if you haven't already, go to Patreon, subscribe. If you've got something to say, comment. We love hearing from you. Me too. If you've got it, don't feel frightened to join the paid membership side, because we will be getting around at some point to putting out premium content. But for the moment, we just want to work on what we're doing right now. We kind of want to apologize for not having a schedule, but on the other hand, it's we don't want to force any content that we think sucks to be on schedule. Right. We don't want to force ourselves to make substandard stuff. We want to give you really good, meaty episodes for the most part. And it is taking time, but good things take time. And, I know that we always point to it, but we do both work a lot. You work 40 hours a week. I work 6 days a week, usually 45 plus hours. We both work a lot. Yeah, and we have kind of weird schedules that by kismet overlap so we can work together. And we appreciate your all's patience, so much. Yes. We appreciate you guys sticking with us and the interest and the love we've gotten. It means a lot. It really does. Yeah, you guys are not just likes on the screen or, faceless comments. Right. We appreciate it. It's not just engagement to drive anything for us. We really do appreciate it so much. Okay. Without further ado, until next time. Let's go ahead and call it. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Good night. Ciao. All right. Bye-bye.